the difference between successful evangelism, and I use the word successful, and revival is this. In evangelism, you have the 2, the 3, the 10, the 20, and possibly the 100 making confession of Jesus Christ. And at the end of the year, you are thankful if half of them are standing. But the community remains untouched. The public houses are crowded, the dancing saloons packed, the theater and the picture house patronized by the hundreds. No change in the community. But in revival, when God the Holy Ghost comes, when the winds of heaven blow, suddenly the community becomes God conscious. A God realization takes hold of young, middle age, and old, so that as in the case of the Hebridean revival, 75% of those saved one night were saved before they came near a meeting. The fear of God, the beginning of wisdom. That is where the difference comes in between evangelism and revival. And that is why I say our only hope is not in crusades. Thank God for all that has been accomplished. Thank God for all that is being done through missions. I represent a mission in Scotland. We have also workers in Canada. And we thank God for all that is being accomplished through the efforts of ministers and evangelists and Christian workers, bringing one here and two there to a saving knowledge of Jesus. But our supreme need and the only answer to the problem that confronts the Christian church today is a visitation from God. Let me illustrate what I mean by an incident that happened not in Lewis or in Uist, but on the small island of Berner. I was addressing the Bangor Convention. The Bangor Convention is perhaps one of the largest conventions in Britain. I was sitting in the pulpit beside the chairman of the convention and the other speaker, when I was suddenly gripped by the conviction that I had to leave the convention and leave at once and go to this island. I turned to the chairman and told him my convictions. Oh, he said, you cannot leave the convention. You're down to give the closing address. Oh, but I couldn't give the closing address with this conviction. So to make a long story short, it was agreed that I should leave the convention. And I left the following morning by plane to the city of Glasgow, and from Glasgow by plane to the town of Stornoway, and then by car across the island, where a ferry boat met me and took me to this island of, say, 500 inhabitants. On arriving, I met a young lad. I said nothing to the men who ferried me across. They were strangers to me. I was never on the island. I wasn't invited to the island, and no one on the island, to my knowledge, had ever met me. But I was there, and I said to the lad that met me, "Could you direct me to the nearest minister?" "We have no minister on the island just now. Both churches are vacant." "Would you then direct me to the nearest elder?" "Yes, the nearest elder lives in that house on the hill." So I said to the lad, "Would you mind going up to the elder and tell him that Mr. Campbell has come to the island? And if he asks what Campbell, tell him the Campbell who was on the island of Lewis." So the young lad went up, and after a few minutes came back and said, "Hector McKinnon was expecting you to arrive today, and you are to stay with his brother, and he has asked me to tell you that he has intimated a meeting in the church for 9 o'clock tonight, and he expects you to address it." Now, explain that as you will. Here was a man who, on the morning of the day that I sat in the church in Bangor, Ireland, decided to spend the day in prayer. He was concerned about the parish, particularly concerned about the state of the young people, growing up in a state of indifference to God and to the church. And his wife told me that on 3 occasions she went to the door of the barn where he was praying, and she heard him pray, "God, I do not know where he is, but you know, and you send him." About 10 o'clock that evening, he was possessed of the conviction that God heard his cry, and that I would be on the island on this particular day, hence the intimation that I would preach in the church at 9 o'clock that evening. We went to the church. Quite a considerable congregation gathered, about 80. The service was a very ordinary service. Indeed, at the end I wondered, after all, if I was led to the island. But there were men there nearer to God than I was. My dear people, we've got to be honest. This old man that I already referred to came to me and said, "I hope you're not disappointed that revival hasn't come to the church tonight, but God is hovering over us, and He will break through any minute." Here was a man near to God. The secret of the Lord is with them that fear Him.